We are approaching the midterm elections faster than many people realize, and the pressure is quietly building inside the White House. Donald Trump has always seen himself as a master negotiator and an elite salesman, someone who can sell anything to anyone if given enough airtime. To be fair, selling has never been his weak spot. The problem he is facing now is not whether he can sell, but what exactly he is trying to sell. After months of minimizing concerns about cost of living, the administration is now attempting a visible shift in messaging paired with a layer of damage control. What makes this moment fascinating is that you can watch the indecision unfold in real time. One day the message is carefully packaged, the next day it unravels. That tension was on full display during a recent rally at a casino resort in Pennsylvania, a location heavy with symbolism whether intentional or not. The speech was clearly designed to focus on the economy, complete with coordinated signage and rehearsed talking points, yet it quickly slid back into familiar territory, blurring the strategy almost as soon as it appeared. Welcome to Political Plot, where we cut through the noise to reveal the power plays shaping American politics. Today we are diving into how political power lives or dies by perception and consistency, especially when economic reality collides with messaging. It is about what happens when leaders try to sell optimism while voters are still feeling pressure in their everyday lives. The central promise being pushed now is affordability, the idea that making life cheaper for Americans is the administration's top priority. On its surface, that sounds like a sensible and even necessary pivot. Cost of living is not an abstract concept. It is something people feel every time they walk into a grocery store or fill up their car. Yet the message becomes complicated when the same speech that emphasizes affordability also treats the word itself as if it were a partisan invention, a talking point cooked up by political opponents. Affordability is framed not as a real problem, but as a narrative weapon. That contradiction is difficult to miss, especially for voters who are experiencing financial pressure firsthand. It also feels oddly disconnected when delivered from the stage of a casino, a place built on the idea that most people will lose more than they gain. The irony deepens when you remember that Trump himself once ran a casino business into failure. Symbolism has a way of undermining even the most polished messaging. In a recent interview, the president was asked to grade his own handling of the economy. His answer was predictably glowing, awarding himself the highest possible marks and then some. Self-confidence has always been part of his brand, but self-evaluation does not move voters. Public perception does. And that perception, according to recent polling averages, shows a majority of Americans dissatisfied with how the economy has been handled. Approval on economic issues is deeply underwater, and that gap matters more than any rally applause. At the same time, global realities continue to complicate the administration's narrative. China, the country targeted by aggressive trade policies, has posted record trade surpluses with the rest of the world. Even if fewer goods are moving directly into the United States, they are flooding global markets elsewhere. The intended pressure has not produced the intended result. The promise that tariffs would revive domestic manufacturing has also failed to materialize in the way supporters hoped. Manufacturing activity has continued to contract month after month. Business leaders have been blunt about the reasons. Tariffs raise the cost of imported parts, making it more expensive to build products domestically. The policy designed to protect industry has, in many cases, squeezed it instead. All of this creates a messaging problem for Republicans as they look toward the midterms. That anxiety showed up in electoral results as well, with Democrats winning key races in traditionally Republican strongholds, including a mayoral race in South Florida that flipped for the first time in decades. These are not isolated signals, they are warnings. When analysts and reporters discuss the administration's economic message, one theme keeps resurfacing: consistency. Advisors clearly want the president to emphasize lowering costs and improving affordability. That line polls well, but his personal instincts often pull him in another direction. He continues to frame affordability as a manufactured concern, even while acknowledging isolated successes like lower gas prices or reduced egg costs. The problem is that voters do not experience the economy in isolated data points. They experience it holistically. They feel pressure across rent, food, healthcare, and education. Highlighting a few improvements does not erase the broader sense of strain, and dismissing that strain risks alienating people who might otherwise be persuadable. Within Republican circles, this creates unease. Publicly, the party remains largely unified. Privately, concern is growing. Polling shows that worry about the economy has intensified rather than eased since Trump took office. That trend sets off alarm bells for lawmakers who are thinking not only about the upcoming election, but about the future of the party beyond Trump. Some are already choosing to step away rather than face difficult races tied closely to his brand. Others are staying, but nervously watching the ground shift beneath them. There is also the issue of tone. When the president speaks about affordability with sarcasm or mockery, it lands poorly with voters who see the issue as deeply personal. Affordability is not an abstract policy debate. It is about whether families can breathe a little easier at the end of the month. Treating it lightly risks making the administration appear out of touch. Even sound bites meant to project confidence can quickly become fodder for opposition ads, replayed endlessly as evidence of disconnect or arrogance. Strategically, rallies are designed to produce clean visuals and short clips for the evening news. Carefully printed signs, simple slogans, and repeated phrases are meant to lock in a narrative, but Trump has a long history of undermining his own messaging by deviating from the script. He places enormous weight on the stock market as a measure of success, often equating rising indexes with broad prosperity. That perspective ignores the reality that market gains disproportionately benefit the wealthy. For millions of Americans, a rising market does not translate into a rising standard of living. This gap between macro indicators and personal experience is where political danger lives. Democrats are keenly aware of this opening. They see an opportunity to center their message on cost of living and economic fairness, particularly in rural and heartland communities that often feel overlooked. Farmers, for example, may accept government aid packages, but many would prefer stable markets over temporary relief. Aid can feel like a bandage applied after damage has already been done. There is a growing sense that trade policies created the problem and then asked voters to be grateful for compensation. That narrative resonates beyond agriculture. It speaks to a broader frustration with policies that cause disruption first and offer relief later. For Democrats, the challenge is execution. Winning these voters requires more than messaging. It requires showing up, listening, and focusing relentlessly on economic concerns rather than cultural distractions. It may also require embracing a more populist tone than some party leaders are comfortable with. But the opportunity is there, especially if Republicans continue to struggle with internal contradictions. From the White House perspective, sending Trump out on the campaign trail is a calculated risk. On one hand, his rallies energize the base like few others can. His supporters show up in large numbers, and that enthusiasm can be contagious. On the other hand, history suggests that midterm elections tied closely to Trump have not favored Republicans. When the election becomes a referendum on him, the results have often been disappointing for his party. If the economy fails to improve in ways people can feel, or if inequality continues to widen, that risk grows even larger. Voters are not blind to the fact that Trump and his family have become wealthier while many Americans feel stuck. Ultimately, the effectiveness of the strategy depends on empathy and discipline. If the president can stay focused, acknowledge the reality of people's struggles, and speak about affordability without dismissing it as a partisan trick, the message might land. If not, the disconnect will continue to widen. The midterms are approaching, and the window to reshape public perception is narrowing. History suggests that ignoring these warning signs is rarely a winning move.